All right, let's get right into it. Today we're talking about how arguments can be designed to trick you.
You've been there, right? You're in a debate, you have all the facts, you know you're right, but somehow you walk away feeling like you lost. It's so frustrating because you knew the logic was on your side, but your opponent just twisted things in a way you couldn't quite put your finger on.
Well, here's the thing. Chances are, you weren't actually out-argued. You were probably outmaneuvered. You were tricked by something called a logical fallacy. Think of these as the dirty plays in an arguer's playbook, specifically designed to mislead and win an argument through foul play. So today, we're going to open that playbook and expose 3 of the sneakiest tricks inside.
Okay, first up, let's look at trick number 1. This one's called the abusive analogy, and it's really subtle, often pretty witty, and man, is it effective at making a solid point seem completely ridiculous.
So what is it exactly? An abusive analogy isn't just a straight-up insult. It's much cleverer than that. It's when you compare your opponent or their argument to something so absurd or awful that the audience can't help but have a negative reaction. The whole goal isn't to be logical, it's to make the audience feel a certain way.
And here we have an absolute master of this at work. This quote comes from the Irish politician Daniel O'Connell, and he was describing his rival. Now just think about that for a second. A silver plate on a coffin is polished and shiny, so on the surface, the comparison works. But it immediately makes you think about death, coldness, and what lies underneath. It's just a brilliant, devastating way to paint someone as fake without ever saying it directly.
So, let's break down how this little sleight of hand actually works. First, you link your opponent to something that just feels bad. You're basically hijacking emotions to do the work that logic is supposed to do. And the trickiest part, like we saw, is that the comparison can even be kind of true on some level, which makes it really hard to fight back against. Take this example here, saying Smith knows as much about ships as an Armenian band leader. What does that even mean? It's designed purely to make him sound incompetent and out of place. It's a total distraction from the actual topic, and it's completely unfair.
All right, let's move on to trick number 2. This one's called the fallacy of accent, and it's all about how you can weaponize emphasis. So the fallacy of accent is wild. It's where you can take a sentence and completely change its meaning just by stressing a single word. It's a verbal trap. By putting that unusual emphasis on a word, you can smuggle in all these new ideas and implications that the original speaker never ever intended. Just look at how powerful this is. The original statement is simple. Mother said we shouldn't throw stones on the windows. Pretty clear, right? But what if someone repeats it as, Mother said we shouldn't throw stones on the windows? Well, suddenly that implies that throwing, say, lumps of metal is perfectly fine. Or how about, Mother said we shouldn't throw stones on the windows? Ah, see? Now it sounds like throwing them through the windows is A-okay. It's the exact same words, but a totally different message.
So where do you see this trick? Well, it's perfect for finding loopholes and rules and making things sound way more permissive than they are. But its most deceptive use is for discrediting people. You can quote someone perfectly, but add your own spin with your tone, like saying, he said he would never lie to the American people. That little stress on the word lie suddenly plants a seed of doubt. It suggests, okay, maybe he won't tell an outright lie, but what about other ways of deceiving people? It makes an honest statement sound incredibly shady.
And that brings us to our third and final trick in the playbook today, the fallacy of accident. This is a favorite of people who love to tear down a perfectly good rule by finding one single bizarre weakness.
So the fallacy of accident is what happens when someone takes a general common sense rule, something that's true most of the time, and then they attack it using a totally weird freak exception. The mistake here is that they're treating a general guideline as if it's an unbreakable universal law that can't have any exceptions ever.
Plato actually gave us the classic example of this, and seeing it laid out step by step really makes it click. You start with a solid general rule. It's right to repay what you owe. Sounds good. Then you introduce a completely wild exception. Okay, but what if you borrowed weapons from a friend, and then they went insane and now they want their weapons back to hurt someone? And then comes the flawed leap in logic. Therefore, the entire rule about repaying what you owe must be wrong. See? You're using one extreme accidental scenario to try and kill a rule that works perfectly fine 99.9% of the time.
And right here, this is the core weakness of this whole trick. The reality is, almost every single general rule has some kind of weird exception. That's what makes them generalizations in the first place, not ironclad laws of the universe.
Admitting you shouldn't give weapons back to someone who has lost their mind doesn't mean the principle of repaying debts is bad. It just means you have to use common sense. An exception doesn't break the rule.
Okay, so we've just unpacked 3 pretty powerful argumentative tricks. Now, let's put it all together. Think of this next part as your own personal field guide, so you can start spotting these things out in the real world.
So here's your cheat sheet. You've got the abusive analogy, which tries to make someone look ridiculous with a clever comparison that's all emotion and no logic. Then you have accent, which twists words by emphasizing them to smuggle in new meanings. And finally, you have accident, which uses a rare freak exception to try and tear down a perfectly good general rule.
The point of all this is that you now have a field guide. You're no longer just a potential victim of these tricks. Now you can be a spotter. You can see the plays developing as they happen, and you'll know exactly what's going on.
So, I'll leave you with this question. Now that you know the tricks in the playbook, who are you going to catch using them first? A politician on TV? A pundit online? Maybe even a friend during your next debate? Start listening for them. You'll be surprised what you find.